In December of the year 1603, Florence was ablaze with lights. Garlands, candles, and banners adorned the streets. The great sculptor himself, Leonardo da Vinci, was designing how to decorate the piazzas and colonnades so that the celebration would shine with a magnificence worthy of the Holy Roman Emperor. Everything was to testify to the splendor of the House of Vittori and the triumphant marriage alliance between Florence and the Holy Roman Empire. The crowd rejoiced. Musicians played lutes and viols. It seemed that this evening was destined to be the beginning of a great love story. But for 21-year-old Isabella Fiore, it turned into her first humiliation. She stood amidst the golden shimmer of brocade and expensive jewels, surrounded by guests, her heart beating especially hard. She had hoped to see the man with whom she was to share her life. She waited, and each time her gaze involuntarily drifted toward the doors, hoping they would swing open and he would enter. The tall, stately monarch, her husband. But the doors remained silent. The groom was absent. Christopher Gallant, the King of Germany, had not arrived. He deemed it acceptable to entrust the ceremony to proxies. He himself remained preoccupied with matters of state. The celebration took place without him. A lavish wedding, a rich feast, dancing, and music. Count Valerio Vittori proudly displayed his niece's dowry. Fabrics, jewels, gold, chests of ducats. Guests gasped, seemingly forgetting that the bride stood nearby, in the shadows, her eyes full of a silent question. Where was he? She watched the door, hoping until the very last moment. But instead of her husband, she saw only officials, ambassadors, and courtiers. The next day, Valerio informed her curtly, "You must set out. Your husband awaits you on the other side of the mountains." Isabella nodded silently. She did not argue. She had been taught obedience, taught to believe that a woman's duty was to submit to family interests. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the silks and pearls, lived a girl who hoped her husband would look at her with warmth, that there would be a place for tenderness in her destiny. Isabella Fiore was born in the spring of 1472, amidst the splendor of the Florentine court. Her grandfather, Duke Marcello Vittori, was one of those rare men who create dynasties not by birthright, but by force of intellect and sword. He was a mercenary commander, a military leader capable of turning the chaos of war into a tool for power. Florence became his trophy, and the name Vittori, a symbol of a new era. Isabella's father, Duke Leopold Vittori, inherited the power and a cruel disposition. In Florence, he was feared. In Italy, he was hated. He could generously patronize artists, musicians, and scholars, yet he was also infamous for his debauchery and tyranny. In 1476, when little Isabella was only 4 years old, the hatred for the Duke culminated in a conspiracy. He was stabbed with daggers in the Basilica of Santa Croce. Power then passed to his brother, Valerio Vittori, nicknamed Count Ombroso for his dark complexion. Although the official ruler was considered to be 12-year-old Count Julian, Isabella's brother, the power in Florence was effectively held by Valerio. He possessed cunning, the ability to maneuver between alliances, and most importantly, he was ready to use his relatives in marriage politics, like chess pieces. Isabella first learned the taste of a pawn's destiny, even before she learned to read. Less than 2 years after her birth, the girl was already betrothed to her cousin, Prince Edward I of Orleans. but he died as a 16-year-old adolescent, leaving 10-year-old Isabella a widow who did not even understand what marriage was. Naturally, the marriage was only on paper, but the shadow of the seal had already fallen upon her fate. Her youth passed quietly, under the guardianship of her very ambitious uncle. The girl grew into a slender woman with soft features and light eyes that always reflected a slight sadness. She was not dazzlingly beautiful, but there was something noble about her. An oval face, a high forehead, and hair the color of golden honey, neatly styled according to the Florentine fashion. She was considered one of the most desirable brides in Europe, a rich dowry, dynastic ties, the name Vittori. All of this made her a match for which kings were ready to enter negotiations. When Christopher Gallant asked for her hand, Valerio barely concealed his delight. "You have been granted an honor that only the chosen can dream of," he said to his niece, embracing her shoulders. "The wife of the future Holy Roman Emperor. Is this not the highest happiness?" Isabella smiled, embarrassed and touched. Her heart fluttered for a moment. She wanted to believe her uncle. She wanted to think that love, and not just political calculation, awaited her. She did not yet know that Christopher was seeking not love, but money. Her dowry of 400,000 ducats would become more important to him than the bride herself. By that time, Christopher was a widower. His first wife, Adeline L'Etoile, had died tragically, falling from a horse. She was only 25 years old. The death of his beloved shook the king so deeply that he cherished the memory of Adeline for the rest of his life. Their marriage was a rare example of tenderness and genuine intimacy. They shared one bedroom, talked for hours, and consulted each other on everything. After her death, Christopher seemed to have lost the capacity to love. He would weep remembering Adeline and confess to his confidants that his heart forever remained with her. Adeline was the only one, he told the abbot in moments of weakness. Everything else is but shadows. But matters of state demanded otherwise. The king needed money for wars and strengthening his power. In his new marriage, he was attracted not by the bride, but by her very substantial dowry, 400,000 ducats, which Florence generously gave for the honor of becoming related to the House of Gallant. November, 1603. A wedding was organized in Florence that was spoken of for years, but the groom was absent from the celebration. He was represented by a trusted ambassador. To the city, it looked like an unprecedented humiliation. Valerio persuaded himself and his niece that everything was explainable. Matters of state, military plans, important negotiations. Isabella sat in a lavish attire embroidered with gold and pearls, listening to congratulations. But her heart was full of anxiety. She caught every sound at the door. "What if he still comes?" she thought. "What if he wants to glance at me, if only for a moment?" But the miracle did not happen. When Count Ambroso said the next day, "Prepare yourself, Isabella. You have a journey ahead over the mountains. There, beyond the mountains, your husband awaits." Isabella lowered her eyes and obediently nodded. On a winter morning, as Isabella prepared for her departure, hope lived in her heart. She believed that even though he did not come to Florence, he would surely be waiting for her somewhere beyond the passes. She pictured their meeting in her imagination. He would lift her into his arms, say a gentle word, and all doubts would vanish. With heavy chests, retinue, and servants, she set out on the road. The journey was agonizing. Cold winds, snowy passes, and fatigue that even her young body refused to obey. Sometimes she had to walk on foot, wrapped in furs, to ease the burden on the horses. The blush was gone from her cheeks. Her fingers were numb, but she did not complain. Hope lived within her. Beyond these cold mountains, her husband was waiting. There, in a warm hall, he would smile at her and say the words for which it was worth enduring everything. "My lady, rest," her ladies-in-waiting pleaded. "You are too tired." "No," she quietly replied. "I must go. The sooner we arrive, the sooner this waiting will end." But instead of her husband, she was met only with new orders. In the city of Elsinore, a messenger was waiting for her. Bowing low, he delivered a brief message. "His Majesty awaits you in Adelheim." Isabella nodded reservedly, concealing her hurt. She did not utter a word, only clenched her fingers to hide her trembling. When she arrived in Adelheim, it turned out that Christopher had changed his plans again. He was not there. "The king awaits you in Lancaster," the local nobles told her, their eyes apologetic, but not their words. "Lancaster," she whispered, looking out the windows. "How much longer?" The strange game of hide-and-seek continued. Each new stop seemed like a mockery. "Does he truly not want to see me?" Isabella once blurted out, sitting by the fireplace in a roadside inn. The ladies-in-waiting exchanged glances, but no one dared to answer. Lancaster met her with a gloomy sky and the stern faces of the courtiers. Here, for the first time, she heard sympathy from the mouths of the imperial dignitaries. "His Majesty has departed on important business," they said gently. "You will have to wait." The words were courteous, but they hinted at the bitter truth. Isabella was not eagerly expected by anyone. The heart of the young queen filled with anxiety. She wrote letters to her husband, begging him to come quickly. "My lord," she wrote in an even hand, "my heart longs for your presence. Allow me to see your eyes soon." The reply came only a few weeks later. Cold lines, written by a stranger's hand. "His Majesty awaits you in the city of Trent." And only on the evening of the 9th of March, 1604, after months of waiting and wandering, did the spouses finally meet. Isabella stood at the entrance to the hall, her heart beating so loudly that she feared everyone could hear it. He entered, tall, stately, with an expressive face. He seemed the embodiment of power, but his gaze was cold and indifferent. "Your Majesty," she whispered, lowering her head. Christopher approached, touching her hand with a barely noticeable movement. "Welcome, Isabella. Your journey was difficult, but now you are safe." These words sounded like courtesy, not a husband's greeting. There was no joy or curiosity in his tone. Later, he instructed servants to escort her to the prepared chambers, and added dryly, "I will come to you later." That evening, the emperor spoke for a long time with the bishop and the Florentine ambassador, and Isabella submissively waited for him in her chambers. Only near dawn did the door open, and his footsteps echoed loudly in the silence. He entered, fulfilled his marital duty, and soon withdrew, as if nothing special had happened. When the door closed behind him, Isabella sank onto the pillows and, for the first time in a long while, allowed herself to cry. Her dreams of meeting her husband melted away like snow in her palms. A new, more solemn marriage ceremony took place in Lancaster. In public, the emperor was polite. He held his wife's hand, delivered welcoming remarks. Nobles applauded, musicians played, but in Isabella's eyes shone the silent knowledge. It was all pretense. Behind closed doors, everything reverted to the cold truth. Christopher disappeared for days, leaving for state affairs, or hiding behind the walls of councils and negotiations. Sometimes he returned, and then Isabella felt that only one thing was expected of her: an heir. In such moments, he was near, but silent, focused, a stranger. When Isabella tried to converse with him, he answered briefly, as if tired even of her presence. "Your Majesty," she once said timidly, "if I have displeased you in any way, tell me, and I will try to change." He looked at her with that tired smirk that caused more pain than anger. "You are too serious, Isabella, but that is not your fault." And he turned away. To her, he was a mystery, but to him, she was just part of a deal, a profitable alliance that gave him gold for his wars. The emperor barely concealed his indifference. "My wife is too boring. She is quickly gaining weight, and she doesn't know how to enliven my leisure," he said in the circle of his confidants, not even considering that these words might reach his wife. "I find her uninteresting." He complained about her silent disposition and mockingly spoke of her appearance. In letters to diplomats, he called his wife a shadow, as if devoid of will and life. And these words reached Isabella, each one cutting her heart. She remained silent, but her silence was a cry from the soul. There were days when she waited for his arrival with hope. She prayed that the Lord would grant them a child. Perhaps then her husband would look at her differently. Several times she felt life stirring inside her, but each time, hope crumbled. Miscarriages left her body weak and her soul tormented. "Lord," she whispered, pressing her hands to her abdomen, "give me strength. Give me a child. Let it be my comfort." But God remained silent. With each passing year, her smile became rarer. She learned to hide her pain behind a calm expression. A queen must maintain dignity, even if her heart is broken. The silence of the court was heavier for her than any mountain passes. In Lancaster and the other gallant residences, Isabella felt like a prisoner in her own chambers. Christopher came rarely and briefly, as if performing an unpleasant duty. He was preoccupied with wars, negotiations, tournament amusements, anything but his spouse. She once dared to ask him, "My sovereign, why are you so rarely with me?" He looked at her with a slight sneer. "You have nothing to complain about. You have everything a woman of your position needs: a title, chambers, a retinue. What more do you want?" Isabella knew about her husband's love affairs. Too many ladies wanted to be in the king's embrace. Rumors reached her inevitably, but she never complained publicly. Sometimes her ladies-in-waiting tried to spare her ears, but the whisper in the court halls was too loud. "He was with that French woman," she heard behind her back. "They say he has a new favorite now." Isabella pretended not to hear. She sat upright, controlled the trembling in her hands, and looked in the mirror, as if convincing herself that her face was still calm. Only at night, when the walls of the bedroom shielded her from prying eyes, did she allow herself to lay her head on the pillow and weep silently. Her salvation became her relationship with Christopher's children from his first marriage, Prince Edgar and Princess Amelia. In them, she saw those who at least slightly accepted her presence. Edgar was kind-hearted and polite. For a time, he even paid his stepmother's expenses, understanding that his father did not consider it necessary to care for his wife. "My lady, I will do everything to make things easier for you," he said. "You are part of our family now." These words touched her heart, and for the first time in a long time, she felt gratitude. But even her stepson's generosity had limits. "Forgive me," Edgar once said sadly. "I can no longer pay your bills. My father should care for you, not I." She nodded, not uttering a word. Inside, there was only the shameful feeling of dependence. Isabella's position became increasingly humiliating. Wherever she went, she was met by creditors demanding payment of debts left by her husband. There was no money, and she had to sell her jewels. Gradually, necklaces, rings, and brocade dresses were gone. Then, embroidered gowns and expensive fabrics. Only the memory of former splendor remained. She, the daughter of Florence, the niece of Count Umbroso, a queen by title, found herself almost a pauper. She learned to live modestly, but the modesty of a queen was always perceived as a disgrace. Servants whispered, courtiers mocked. The emperor behaved as if his wife did not exist at all. He organized tournaments, feasts, and invited guests. The halls were filled with laughter, cups clinked, and music played. Meanwhile, Isabella counted coins, deciding which of her outfits she would have to sell to pay for bread for her court. In 1606, one of his subjects wrote to the king himself, "The queen and her ladies have credit for only 3 or 4 days. If no money arrives, they won't even be given bread." But the emperor was in no hurry to help. He simply did not care. To him, Isabella was a burdensome reminder of an unprofitable marriage, a woman for whom he could not feel the slightest sympathy. He had long spent his wife's dowry, and now he was more concerned with new wars and diplomatic alliances. And yet, despite her husband's coldness and the humiliation, Isabella tried to maintain her dignity. She understood that her life had become a farce, but that dignity remained the last shield she could use against mockery. In 1609, fate dealt her a new blow. Ferdinand IX, King of Castile, invaded central Italy. Count Valerio Vittori, her once all-powerful uncle, fled Florence and arrived in Lancaster, hoping to find protection from his son-in-law. But the emperor received him coldly. The emperor had already forgotten the marriage that had been concluded for the sake of a profitable alliance, and the wealth brought by Isabella's dowry. "Your affairs are your worries," he replied. Making it clear that he owed nothing further, Isabella begged her husband, "Allow me at least to meet with my uncle. He is in trouble." But Christopher forbade her even this. Thus, the last thread connecting her to her homeland was broken. With each passing year, bitterness and loneliness were increasingly reflected in Isabella's appearance. Once noble and refined, she now wore worn-out clothes, hiding her face under simple veils. Loneliness forced Isabella to seek solace in strange habits. She became addicted to eating mushrooms, a simple and modest food that she considered the last remaining source of enjoyment. But even this simple comfort turned into a reason for mockery. Courtiers whispered, "The queen eats like a beggar," as if reproaching her for committing a crime against her title. Doctors strictly forbade her this. "Your Majesty, stop eating mushrooms. It is harmful," they said. "It is better to agree to bloodletting. It will restore your strength." Isabella merely waved them away. "Leave me," she replied tiredly. "Let at least food bring me comfort." By the age of 38, Isabella looked like an aged woman. Her gaze had become dull, and her posture stooped. She rarely appeared in public. Rumors of her plight spread across Europe, but Christopher cared little. Over the years, Isabella's health began to fail. Despondency, melancholy, and loneliness sapped her strength. The court doctors offered potions and infusions, but they could not heal a soul wounded by emptiness. In 1618, in Lancaster, the life of Isabella Fiore ended. She was only 46 years old. Her death passed quietly, almost unnoticed in the great history of the gallants. No solemn speeches, no special grief, only brief entries in the chronicles, and the memory of a few loyal servants. The emperor did not attend the funeral, and did not arrange the lavish ceremonies befitting a queen. For him, this marriage was nothing more than a mistake, a bad farce that was best forgotten. The king survived his wife by 8 years, and according to rumors, sought new dynastic alliances, leaving behind coldness and oblivion, and Isabella's image remained an eternal testament to the bitterness of unhappy love, betrayal, and loneliness that spared neither body nor soul. Thus ended the life of a woman who could have once been a symbol of the union between two great houses. Her fate is another tragic example of how the splendor of a crown and wealth do not guarantee happiness. She possessed so much gentleness and desire to love, but in the cold world of dynastic calculations, there was no room for it.